What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the episode of The Lawyer You Know. And today we are going to break down the entire lawsuit against Mark Sanchez and Fox. Specifically, we're going to talk about how the lawyer got this turned around so quickly, like a day after the event happened. And is there real liability against Fox? Those are the two big questions most people have. Of course, we're going to break down the allegations against Mark Sanchez personally as well and answer so many of the questions that have already come in on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube about this lawsuit and this case and what we know now. So, as we bring up this lawsuit to discuss in civil court, things are so much different than criminal court. In civil court, you as the victim and the victim's attorney, which is the type of work I usually do, right? On the plaintiff side in injury cases, a lot of times it's a wrongful death case, a trucking accident, a car accident case. These are the types of cases that I handle, but battery also fits into that. And negligent security fits into that. Was there proper security at the place? Negligent hiring. Did an employee do something that you knew or should have known they were going to do and you didn't guard against it? You didn't train better or train enough. You didn't set up enough precautions in place to protect people from your employees. What were they actually doing at the time? These are all kinds of cases that I handle. But what's important is so many cases you have to do a serious investigation before you can get enough facts to file a lawsuit and move it forward in court. So while oftentimes it doesn't take as long to start a case as a criminal case, sometimes criminal cases are quicker, civil cases are quicker. It all depends. But the plaintiff's lawyer and the plaintiff themselves, the victim in these cases or alleged victim, usually can drive the timeline. And sometimes it happens very quickly. And I think some of the reasons for why you would want to do this so quickly if you're the victim are obvious. Everybody's talking about this case now. Most people are not fond of what they believe Mark Sanchez's actions to be in this case. He is presumed innocent in the criminal court system, and these are just allegations in civil court. He has not been found liable in any court of law at this point. So while these allegations, as you read a complaint, are taken as true when the judge looks at them for things like motion to dismiss, it doesn't mean this is exactly how it happened, exactly how it was in the probable cause affidavit, exactly what all the reports are saying, or exactly what's going to be in this complaint. We don't know that to be true. But to try and figure out how he could possibly have claims against Fox and could he possibly have claims against Mark Sanchez, which seems very obvious at this point, we're going to read these facts as he sets them out in this complaint. So Perry Toll is the alleged victim versus Mark Sanchez and Fox Corporation. The complaint for damages and jury trial demand. So these are literally the types of complaints that we write. They don't always look exactly like this one looks, but to break this down is feeling like I'm talking about what I do every day, right? So by the way, make sure you guys hit that like button. If you're ready to talk about another civil case and a civil complaint, we always love when that happens for just a civil lawyer, as they say. And if you're new to the channel, that's a joke. I do a lot of criminal defense in my career before. I focus primarily on civil now. 99% of my practice is civil is what I say. My firm still does a lot of criminal defense. My dad's one of the best criminal defense attorneys all time in this state. We've prosecuted cases. My dad, myself, JD, we're all on that side and on this side. Another one of our lawyers, Pete, was a public defender, worked at the public defender's office before coming and doing this. We've got a lot of criminal defense in our firm as well. And a lot of the cases we talk about on this channel, including the parallel case for Mark Sanchez, is a criminal case, but it's always interesting when the civil case follows along, especially this quickly. So let's take a read. Comes now the plaintiff, Perry Toll, by counsel Eric J. May of whatever his firm name is, I can't pronounce, Galitko and Daly, and for his complaint for damages and jury trial demand against the defendants, Mark Sanchez and Fox Corporation. Jurisdiction. This court has jurisdiction over this matter pursuant to the laws of the state of Indiana as the events giving rise to this complaint occurred in Indianapolis, Marion County, Indiana. That's just determining where this action took place, where the damage took place, usually is the proper jurisdiction since the fight or battery, whatever you want to call it, happened in Indiana, Marion County. That's why we're in Marion Superior Court. The parties, who's involved here? First, we have the plaintiff, Perry Toll. He's an individual residing in the state of Indiana who was the victim of the action described herein. The defendant is Mark Sanchez, hereinafter referred to as Sanchez, is an individual who, upon information and belief, resides in the state of California and was involved in the incident described herein. Number 4, Fox Corporation is a foreign corporation that, upon information and belief, is incorporated in the state of Delaware and is the employer of defendant Sanchez. We're not going to talk about how corporations, why they incorporate in Delaware. It's a very normal thing for these corporations to be there, not in California where a lot of people think it happens. But we'll get into that maybe another day. So, okay, here are the factual allegations. Defendant Sanchez is an employee of the defendant Fox Corporation. Defendant Sanchez traveled to the state of Indiana as part of his employment duties for the defendant Fox Corporation and the television broadcast of the NFL football game involving the Indianapolis Colts and Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday, October 5th, 2025. So, from all reports, and being a football fan myself and listening to Mark Sanchez call games, this seems normal that he is on one of the Fox broadcasts. This is where they were at this Sunday. He's going to call this game. That all seems fine. This is part of his job. This is what he was hired to do. None of that seems outlandish. I understand that. We understand the connection between Fox and Mark Sanchez at this point, according to these factual allegations. Now, we haven't seen anything that gives rise to any civil liability, but we're just getting the connections and the background here of the parties. At all times relevant, plaintiff Perry Toll was performing his duties as an employee of a company specializing in commercial cooking oil, recycling, and disposal at the loading dock area of the Westin Hotel, where he was approached by defendant Sanchez. So this paragraph is in there to explain that the plaintiff, aka the victim in this case, was there lawfully, doing nothing wrong, waiting to do his job when Mark Sanchez created this problem. That's what they're trying to tell us here in these allegations and these factual background. Defendant Sanchez, appearing intoxicated, instigated an altercation with plaintiff Perry Toll, claiming that plaintiff Perry Toll could not be at the location and that defendant Sanchez had spoken to the hotel manager. So you might notice something else about these facts. They're going to sound a lot like what we read in the probable cause affidavit. And that is a reasonable basis to make these factual allegations. So they're never going to be able to say, oh, you lied. Or, I guess if there's anything Perry told them that is not true, then they could get him for that. But this is what's in the factual allegations. This is what witnesses corroborate. This is what law enforcement says the video showed. I don't even know if this plaintiff's lawyer has seen the video at this point. This would be awful quick for him to see the video. Sometimes law enforcement will cooperate like that. But if it's an open criminal investigation, which it seems to be, a lot of times they won't give us this stuff that early. Maybe they'll show it to us, maybe not. This is definitely something, the video of the altercation, you would get in discovery. But I like to have it. I don't always have it before a lawsuit. I'll just tell you that. Sometimes defendants will have control of the video. They'll see the video. They will not share it with us until after we file a lawsuit and force them to in discovery. So it's not like every civil lawsuit you have to have the video first, but in an ideal world, you want to do as much of an investigation, get as many documents and witness statements as you can to be very confident going forward in your lawsuit. No way they were able to do a deep dive in this case prior to filing this lawsuit. Doesn't mean the lawsuit's a sham. It doesn't mean it's just a empty money grab. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with this lawsuit. It just means it's different than cases where you do have a lot of time and you think it's necessary to put in that time to do the background investigation. They may think timing is of the essence. And by the way, this is what I would call a bare bones complaint. Not every complaint that we file is some incredibly complex legal document. We can easily turn complaints around in one day if we need to. Absolutely. And we have. Cases coming up to the statute of limitations, we do as quick of an investigation as we possibly can in order to protect the victim's rights. We have to file the lawsuit quick. A law change is going to happen. We've got to file the lawsuit tomorrow. We are able to do that as lawyers. Take the time necessary to draft these complaints, check all the boxes to make sure within the four corners of the complaint, you do every single thing necessary in order to get the ball rolling. Because a lot of times you can also amend complaints. If there's something you accidentally missed, if there's an allegation you want to add, if there's a count you want to add, you can amend the complaint. In most jurisdictions, you can amend it once without even asking the court. But most courts will allow you to amend the complaint as long as it's for a reasonable purpose. And a lot of times, opposing counsel won't even object to you amending the complaint if it's for a reasonable purpose. So this might not be the final version of the document that they go to trial on, if, of course, it ever gets there, which I would guess it's not going to get there. Okay, during the interaction, defendant Sanchez attempted to enter and later entered plaintiff Perry Toll's work truck without permission and blocked plaintiff Perry Toll from accessing his cell phone to contact his manager. The situation escalated when defendant Sanchez physically blocked and shoved plaintiff Perry Toll, leading plaintiff Perry Toll to use pepper spray in self-defense. It's obviously important that that's in self-defense. And when we read what the actual causes of action, meaning what Perry Toll is suing Mark Sanchez and Fox for, they're going to marry these facts with the law to get us to those causes of action. So we're reading through the facts here still. I want to see how they put it together and legally get to where they say they are in this civil lawsuit. The situation escalated when, I already read that. Despite the use of pepper spray, defendant Sanchez continued to advance toward plaintiff Perry Toll, resulting in a physical altercation, which resulted in Perry Toll suffering significant injuries to his head, jaw, and neck. On October 4th, 2025, at approximately 12:35 a.m., officers from Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department were dispatched to 301 Washington Street, Indianapolis, Indiana. Upon arrival, officers found plaintiff Perry Toll bleeding profusely and severely injured. Defendant Sanchez was subsequently arrested for battery, unlawful entry to a motor vehicle, and public intoxication. So while this might not come in an actual civil trial, you put it in your complaint, you're allowed to put it in your complaint, but it's definitely not going to be something that the jury hears unless there's a conviction, obviously, and you say he was convicted for this. But just being arrested for something, or somebody accusing you of something in criminal court, doesn't always come in and become relevant in the civil case. But this absolutely beefs up a civil complaint, especially if later the person pleads guilty or is convicted of those crimes. Then you can use it as res judicata, which means the criminal court with a higher burden has already determined he's guilty of this. So in civil court, the only thing left for us really to determine is, did what he was arrested for cause damages, and what is the amount of those damages, meaning how much money in civil court, because that's what you can go after in civil court. They can't throw Mark Sanchez in jail. That's for the criminal court, which we've already kind of broken down what's going on there and what he was arrested for. This is civil justice, money damages. Count 1, assault and battery. Plaintiff, so here now we get to the actual law and the cause of action. We read the 14 paragraphs of the facts. Now let's see what cause of action they feel they have against Sanchez and Fox. First is assault and battery. Plaintiff Perry Toll incorporates by reference the allegations contained in paragraphs 1 through 14 as if fully set forth herein, meaning paragraphs 1 through 14, they might as well be here in this cause of action. Defendant Sanchez intentionally and unlawfully made harmful and offensive contact with plaintiff Perry Toll, causing serious bodily injury. Defendant Sanchez's actions constitute malicious, willful, wanton, or grossly negligent conduct. As a direct and proximate result of the defendant Sanchez's actions, plaintiff Perry Toll suffered severe, permanent disfigurement, loss of function, other physical injuries, emotional distress, and other damages. So there's a lot of kind of interesting nuance here in what we've read, but intentional conduct, reckless conduct, offensive conduct, a lot of times that language is used in punitive damages situations, meaning not only are you going to get medical bills, pain and suffering, those are compensatory damages, lost wages if he's got to miss work now as a truck driver and misses paychecks, all those things you can sue Mark Sanchez for under this, right? But intentional torts like assault and battery, usually you can also sue for punitive damages. What are punitive damages? They are in place to punish that wrongdoing and deter other people from doing what you claim this defendant did. So big, strapping, strong guys can't be going around punching people, throwing people around, yelling at people, whether they're drunk or not. And we've got to send a message here that these big, strong athletes can't be walking around to different cities and doing this to people. And we have to make sure Mark Sanchez himself doesn't do this again. So let's punish this bad behavior and make it hurt. Punitive damages have to hurt. So he knows not to do this again. He'll think twice about doing this again. That's how that kind of works. This one is easy, assault and battery, if these allegations are true. And that's how we're going to look at the complaint when reading the causes of action. That's legally how you're supposed to. I'm not just choosing to do that. If the allegations are true, then an assault and battery claim is definitely going to survive a motion to dismiss and potentially get to a jury if they want to get there after discovery. If they don't settle the case, 90+% of civil cases usually settle. So that's count 1. Let's go to count 2. Negligent hiring, retention, and supervision. They incorporate paragraphs 1 through 18 now. Some courts allow you to incorporate other causes of action. Some don't. Some prefer you just say 1 through 14. But defendant, Fox Corporation. Okay, now we're talking about Fox. We were talking about Sanchez before. Now Fox. They owed a duty of care to plaintiff Perry Toll to ensure that its employees conducted themselves in a reasonable manner. So, first question, is this true? Does Fox owe a duty of care to just random people driving on the street? And generally the answer is yes. Every company owes a duty of care to make sure their employees aren't going out and battering people. They owe a duty of care to make sure that they have a safe environment, that they're training their employees, they're putting them in positions that'll be safe not only for the employees, but for other patrons. But it's very, very important because any of this vicarious liability you try to get on an employer, usually, and I can think of some circumstances where there are exceptions, right? But we're going to talk about the vast majority of these cases. Your employee has to be working within the scope of their employment, meaning if I'm a carpenter, I'm doing carpentry. I'm not throwing darts. I'm not throwing axes. I'm not driving race cars, right? Because that's not what the scope of my employment is, number one. And then number two, I have to be working in furtherance of your business, doing something to help your business. So if I'm a door-to-door salesperson, I'm knocking on doors and I've got your shirt on and your brochure, they open the door and I batter the person who opens the door. Well, that's in the scope of your business and that's in furtherance of your business. But if I'm a door-to-door salesman and I'm drag racing on the weekends, that's not within the scope of my employment. That's not in furtherance of your business. So how are they really going to connect all this up? They've chosen here in count 2, negligent hiring, retention, and supervision. So they are correct that every company owes a duty to, when their employees are working, that they're not injuring other people. Defendant Fox Corporation knew or should have known about defendant Sanchez's unfitness as an employee, propensity for drinking, and or harmful conduct. So now is when we start to get into the biggest answer to your question, which is, does he really have a case against Fox? How could he possibly have a case against Fox? And the answer is, it depends. We are absolutely going to need more facts. For example, if Mark Sanchez truly does have a history of, while on these game weekends when he's calling games and doing things with Fox, getting drunk and beating people up, and Fox never did anything to stop him or protect other people or send somebody with him to make sure he doesn't drink too much or send security with him to make sure he's not going to do this, that they could break up a fight. I could think of all sorts of things that would be appropriate to stop a fight like this if they had knowledge, if they actually knew, or if they should have known. Meaning there's wild reports about this, it's public knowledge. Maybe there's even some other civil lawsuits that, Fox didn't know about it because they never read it, but they absolutely should have. It was easily accessible. And you would think you would want to look into this before you hire somebody. So if they did know this and did nothing about it, potentially you can get that connection. Now, I don't know. I don't know this background about Mark Sanchez. I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe some of you guys watching have read articles or know information that I don't, but they are going to have to prove this fact in order to get some liability on Fox. Additionally, more facts I'd like to know. Where was Mark Sanchez coming from? Where was he going to? What was he doing? Was it a party that Fox put on and they overserved him? And, he left and he was going to another Fox event. Like, the more Fox stuff you can, bring into this situation, the better for the plaintiff. But if he was there to call a game on Sunday and he worked, Saturday prepping for the game, meeting with the teams, went out with some buddies and had some drinks and went down and did this, what kind of a connection is there to Fox? Is he really on the clock? Is this really in the scope of his employment? Are they really on notice that they should be liable for what he's doing here? And that's why knowing about his background, and if he does this on business trips and you do nothing to prevent it, despite this knowledge or the availability of this knowledge, that's important. How available is the knowledge? Defendant Fox Corporation hired defendant, meaning also like you're hiring somebody that's not fit. If you have a big, strong guy who likes to go beat people up when he gets drunk and you're sending him out on weekends to go to parties and drink, and then he goes out and does this, you should be on notice for that. He's not fit to have this role and be this employee and be sent out and have the privilege of being sent out to do this job. And because you knew about that and sent him out anyways, it's now on you. Is that how the facts are going to lay out? I don't know. But I'm trying to give you the idea of how do we get Fox hooked? There has to be a hook. If I work for my firm and I go out and, do something crazy, right? Go get on a boat on the weekend and cause an accident. I'm not going to sue my firm for that. It's nothing to do with me being a lawyer. Defendant Fox Corporation hired defendant Sanchez as an employee, retained defendant Sanchez as an employee, and or failed to supervise defendant Sanchez in his capacity as an employee of the defendant Fox Corporation. So if you knew about this bad behavior, you should have had somebody supervising him, a handler of some sort, something to protect other people from somebody is unfit, has alcohol problems, and is dangerous. That's what they're saying, right? Again, I'm not saying this about Mark Sanchez. This is what the complaint is saying, and this is what they're going to have to prove to connect these dots. Defendant Fox Corporation breached its duty of care to plaintiff Perry Toll as set forth above, as a direct and proximate result of defendant Fox Corporation's negligent hiring, retention, and or failure to supervise. Sometimes you'll see negligent training in there as well, or failure to train. Defendant Sanchez, to supervise its employee, defendant Sanchez, Plaintiff Perry Toll suffered severe permanent disfigurement, loss of function, other physical injuries, emotional distress, and other damages. So the severe and permanent disfigurement, it's going to be interesting if he pleads guilty or gets convicted of the current crimes he's charged with, that battery with serious bodily injury, that could be another admission. That could be another res judicata that he did not only commit the battery, so he's liable, but he caused, meaning causation, significant injury. So that could even take care of some of the other elements of negligence claims, causation and the significance of the damages. Now, you still always are going to have to prove the dollar number because you're not going to get that in criminal court. Restitution does not take into account everything that you can get in civil court to provide you full justice for what somebody does to you. Restitution is certain categories. You can get lost wages. You can get medical bills and things like that, but not pain and suffering, nothing in the future. It doesn't cover all medical bills. So there's plenty of things that you can't get in restitution that you can get in civil court. All right, what's the prayer for relief? This is what he's asking for. Wherefore, Plaintiff Perry Toll, by counsel, respectfully request that this court enter judgment in his favor and against defendant Sanchez and Fox Corporation and award the following relief: compensatory damages in an amount to be determined at trial. So usually there's a jurisdictional amount. I don't see that they pled it here. This complaint seems like it was put together pretty quickly. Does not have all the details and things that we would put in our complaints normally, but maybe it'll be amended, like I said. But compensatory damages will include a lot of what we've been talking about: his medical bills in the past that he's already had now resulting from this, the hospital, his medical bills in the future. Is he going to need some kind of plastic surgery on that gash across his cheek? Is he going to need, any kind of injections or surgery or whatever on his neck, jaw? Who knows? Medical bills in the future, pain and suffering in the past, pain and suffering in the future, lost wages in the past, loss of capacity to earn in the future. Does he have PTSD? Can he not mentally drive the truck anymore? Is he too worried about everybody he sees thinking they're going to jump him and beat him up? What type of emotional distress? Those are all compensatory damages. And then there's B, punitive damages. So because we have the battery charge, the intentional tort, that intentional conduct or grossly negligent conduct, that's how we get to punitive damages. Not all causes of action in civil court even allow you to ask for punitive damages. Some jurisdictions, you actually have to prove up the case and then later request from the court. Like in Florida, we have to request from the court later to amend to add punitive damages. And we have to show the court how we got to this intentional conduct or grossly negligent conduct before we can even ask for punitive damages. Costs and expenses of this action, including reasonable attorney's fees. Again, that's another one that not all jurisdictions does the winner get attorney's fees. Some jurisdictions it does. Some jurisdictions also, there are certain causes of actions that statutorily give you attorney's fees, meaning the statute says if you win, the other side has to pay all your attorney's fees. Any other relief the court deems just and proper. And this was filed on 10/6. I think this happened on the early morning hours of 10/4, October 4th. Is that right? On October 4th, yeah, 12:35 a.m. So what is that, Saturday? Early Saturday morning. Yeah, and this was filed on Monday, the first business day that you could file it. Incredibly fast. And I understand people are going to be out there saying, this is just a money grab. He's a rich defendant. This was always going to be a civil claim. This was always going to be a civil lawsuit. He was, if these allegations are true, both of these guys, right? Whichever one of them is not the aggressor, whichever one of them was the victim in this scenario, has actual damages. They were both seriously injured. So a civil claim was always going to come. Why add Fox? You could say bigger pockets, sure. But in reality, multiple defendants, big corporation, probably insurance with Fox, always more likely to pay because Mark Sanchez's pockets are deep enough for a civil claim. But it is so much harder. I don't care how rich a defendant is. It is so much harder for somebody to reach their hand in their own pocket and stroke a check than for a big company or corporation or insurance company, whatever it may be, to pay it and make a business decision. Do I want to fight this? Do I want to pay lawyers to defend this? Do I want the negative publicity? This could be really bad. Like his damages could be astronomical. If I can settle for a lower amount now, it's a business decision. A lot of times that can happen and big corporations can look at it like that. It's all a risk-reward balance. But when it's somebody personally, and when you have a criminal case going on, a lot of times that can be more difficult. So maybe they're thinking Fox is an easier target. At the same time, it's like, do they really care to pay lawyers? Big corporation, they'll fight this thing to death. They'll try to bleed the victim dry because most plaintiffs' attorneys are doing this contingency. They're not getting paid hourly. They're actually shelling out money for costs. So Fox being so big, having, unlimited money basically, well, they just fight this to the death. and be like, let's see how long you can last. Let's see how desperate you are for money. I'll give you $5,000 today if you go away. So there's all sorts of things happening in the background and decisions being made strategically when these cases happen. But it is an interesting civil lawsuit. I could probably think of some other causes of action depending on the facts. That's the problem. I like to get all the facts so I can think of every potential cause of action that I think I can prove by a greater weight of the evidence or preponderance of the evidence or 51%, just like a criminal prosecutor. What I do on the civil side is client comes to me, they bring me all these facts, and I'm the one that's looking and say, okay, here's the causes of action that are appropriate here. Here's what I believe we can prove. Here's what I don't think we can prove and why. Let's see if we can get more evidence and information here while we're doing the investigation, while we're building up the case. In certain cases are pretty easy and pretty stock, at this point, whether it's a wrongful death or an injury as a result of a car accident or truck accident. A lot of those can have similarities, but the facts will be very different. Cases like this, there's nuance and there's a lot of different potential civil causes of action that could be at play here. And these might not be the only two at the end of the day. As they do their investigation, which I'm willing to bet they're doing right now, and continuing to get information from law enforcement as they're investigating the criminal side, which they said their investigation is still ongoing, you could see causes of action added, causes of action removed, or some things changed in this complaint. So just remember, this might not be the final complaint. So let me know what other questions you guys had in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed. If you want to keep following the Mark Sanchez case, let me know by hitting that like button and telling me in the comments that you're here to stay, you're interested, you want to break down this case. So all we got is a pretty quick review of a complaint. It wasn't the most complex complaint, but that's not always a bad thing. So tell me what you thought of it. But for me, that's all I got. Till next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. And if you have a case that you want to personally talk to us about in your life, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, truck accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.